So the first time I had surgery, I was 17 years old, and my dentist told me that I needed to have my wisdom teeth removed. And I actually only had 2 wisdom teeth. Most people have 4. I just had 2, only 2 came in. Teenage me liked to think that that meant I was a little more evolved than my peers. As an adult, I think maybe I did not get enough calcium as a child. Legit concern. And I remember before the day, I was a little nervous about it, and my brother was talking to me about it, and he had gotten his wisdom teeth taken out the year before, and he had some advice for me. And he said, hey, when you go and you get your wisdom teeth out, ask them if you can keep them. Because he didn't get to keep his, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to keep that? Like, it's part of you, right? Like, you only get in this lifetime 52 of them. And yeah, 52. And if you're lucky, if everything goes ideally, you get like 20 of them, right? So you got to hold on to those. Because who wants a necklace with like only 6 teeth on it? So I filed that away. And so like with that in mind, I was almost looking forward to it. I was nervous. It was the first time I'd ever undergo surgery, the first time I'd ever get put under. But also it had gone really smoothly for my brother, so I wasn't that nervous. So the day arrived, my mom took me there, she drove me there. We went inside, and like the whole surgical team, it happened to be all women, which was like kind of cool. I didn't super register at the time, but I would be very thankful later. Yeah, and I got there, and they made me really comfortable. They were very kind and welcoming. And when I got in the chair, the surgeon explained to me what they were going to do. And because my wisdom teeth were impacted, I mean, they hadn't come out yet, it meant that they were going to cut open my gums, they were going to smash the teeth inside, and they were going to rip them out. You know, the classic cut, smash, rip. Yeah. It's also known as a CCSSRR. It was good to have the explanation, though. I was glad to understand it. So then they started to put me under, right? And in that process, they do like an IV first and then a gas. I don't know if you've ever been put under. And the IV doesn't knock you out, but it makes you kind of loopy, and then the gas is what knocks you out. So they put the IV in me, and I started to feel it a little bit, not super aware of it, but like you could tell it was happening. And all of a sudden I remembered to ask the question to the lady, and I was like, I looked at her and I smiled and I was like, can I keep them? And she didn't know what I was talking about, like I was loopy, right? And she was like, keep what, honey? And I rolled my head and I looked at her and I go, you know. And she laughed at me, like you're all laughing at me. And then she put the mask on my face. And she was like, count backwards from 10. And I was like, 10, 9, 8. And it went fine, and it went great, and I didn't wake up during it, and I didn't feel a thing during it, but I did wake up gagging. Yeah, and I said that deliberately. I didn't wake up and start gagging. I was not gagging before I woke up. As far as I know, I was unconscious. But when I woke up, I was gagging, and it felt very violent. And immediately the ladies were kind of concerned, right? And so they put what looked like a hospital bedpan on my chest in front of my face because I thought I was going to barf. And I wasn't barfing because I did a really good job fasting. So I wasn't barfing, but like I had this bedpan in front of my face, and that was not helping. That seems kind of like an anti-solution to the matter. And at this point, I'm just like gagging, and I must have just responded poorly to the anesthetic. Also, my mouth is full of gauze and blood. So I'm just like this teenage girl, just like gagging my guts out, and these women, they're starting to seem like very alarmed, right? And they're talking over me, and I'm just like gagging, and they're like, they make a decision, and one of them says to me, she's like, Katie, we're gonna give you a shot in your butt. And I was like, oh. And then she repeated herself. She's like, we're going to give you a shot in your butt. And I was like, and then they undid the button on the fly of my jeans, and they pulled my pants down about here, and then they just gave me a shot right in the ass. And it hurt. It hurt so much more than what was going on in my mouth. And it felt like someone had like shoved like a broadsword in my ass, like in my tender 17-year-old gagging ass, and like injected it with like acid or something into my flesh, and it really, really hurt, but it worked, and I stopped gagging. So they like wheeled me off to another room to take a nap on a cot, and when I woke up, everything seemed fine. They rolled me to my mom's car. She drove me home. On the way home, I started gagging again, and this time I actually almost like felt like I was starting to barf a little bit, except I did it into a plastic bag because I had the wherewithal to do it, and I am a considerate barfer. So that was just another thing. I'm like, oh, the anesthesia, I'm just, reacting really poorly. And I get home, and I'm just so relieved to be home and finally be able to take a rest. And I kind of, like slowly, like slog upstairs, and I flop on my bed, and I try to fall asleep. But I soon realize that although my family almost never, ever has work done on the house, they're not a keeping up with the Jones kind of thing. That day, there were roofers there at the house. And the way my house is, at my parents' house, my room is on the second floor in the back left corner. And it just so happened that on that day, the roofers needed to hammer the shit out of the back left corner of the roof of our house. Very unfortunate. So that was going on, and I was just like, oh my God, really? But luckily, I was so dead tired, and the anesthesia was just barely wearing off, and my ass hurt so much. But luckily, I had a prescription for painkillers from the doctor. Yep, that's right. I got myself a nice little RX for some 800 milligram ibuprofen. Yeah. That hard shit. Don't fuck with that. So I had some of that, and I was able to sleep, thankfully. And the next few days were actually all right. The ibuprofen was really intense, but it helped with the pain, and I just had a little bit of nausea throughout. And then a couple days later, I was scheduled to go into work. I worked at the Orange Julius Dairy Queen in the mall food court. That was just a fact from my life. So I went in. Before I went in, I was like, feeling rough, but I can power through this. So I go in, and the second I get there, I realize, like, this is just not good. I did not feel well at all, but I didn't want to leave because given the circumstances at the time, if I did that, I would end up kind of just screwing over my coworkers. And it was like my brother and my really nice manager, Cheryl. So I was really trying to tough it out. So I was just there, just making and serving tons of smoothies and blizzards, just reeling with nausea. And it was just awful, and I just like could barely think, and just like the smell of it was so sweet and overwhelming, and I just like started to look like death, and I would not go home. And my manager Cheryl, she felt really bad at one point, so she offered me like a banana, and I just was barely functioning, so I took it from her, and I remember I just kind of peeled it, and I took a bite, and I just held it in my mouth. and started crying. Not a high point. So they forced me to leave, obviously. That does not sell blizzards, apparently. Now I know. So they sent me home. My mom came and got me. She took me to the doctor and explained the situation. It was still, my wounds were still fresh. Like I was still probably in a lot of pain if I weren't taking the ibuprofen. And the doctor, after hearing the story, decided to not change my painkiller prescription, but to prescribe me anti-nausea medicine to take for the ibuprofen, which makes sense, right? It's like the Hippocratic Oath, you know, you can only fight medicine with medicine. Right? So that works, right? But you know, that actually worked. And when I took them both, I managed the pain and the nausea, and I was fine, and I survived, and my wisdom teeth haven't grown back yet. And that is how I survived my first time under the knife. Thank you very much.
The Shankill Butcher's writing up.